So yeah, whenever you're ready, Stephanie or Christina is going to introduce everything.
I will. All right, we're
I'll
going to
mute
get
myself.
started. So I'm just going to do a little introduction. Welcome, everybody. It is lovely to see you, some of you, and thanks for sharing your time and being here with us tonight. My name is Stephanie Ehrlich, and I'm the Van Cortlandt Park Administrator and the Executive Director of the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. Tonight's presentation is an outgrowth of ongoing work that we're doing to bring to light the history of Black and Native American people in creating Van Cortlandt Park. This is history that is not well known, but should be. Please visit our website, vancortlandt.org, to learn more about the Enslaved People Project and download a free curriculum for students. I want to thank Bronx Council on the Arts for their support of this program, and Community Board 8 for their support of the Enslaved People Project curriculum. And a special shout out to the Enslaved People Project team, Laura Carpenter-Myers from Van Cortlandt House Museum, Nick Dembowski from Kingsbridge Historical Society, Jackie Fisher and DePrater from the Community Task Force, and my colleague Christina Taylor from Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. Van Cortlandt Park is an important part of our community, and especially now, it's a place where people can go to exercise, feel good mentally and spiritually, and just be in nature. During these crazy times, we're all looking for ways to find happiness and good things to get us through the day. The park is a place that's there for you to do just that. I know it's my happy place. I hope it's yours too. If you would like to support the park, visit vancortlandt.org because every gift matters. Tonight, you are in for a treat. Artist and historian Kamau Ware and food writer Nicole A. Taylor will have a dialogue with each other about stealing joy, finding resilience in Black holiday traditions. There will be a question and answer period after the presentation where you can ask questions in the chat. So for now, please mute yourselves. Kamau Ware is an artist historian and the principal of Kamau Studios, a visual storytelling studio based in New York City's Seaport District. Ware is also the founder of Black Gotham Experience, an immersive multimedia project found in 2010 that reimagines the African diaspora as one unified epic through a series of experiences, including walks, talks, media, and events. Nicole A. Taylor is a James Beard Award-nominated food writer, home cook, and producer based in Brooklyn, New York. She's written for the New York Times, Departures, and Atlas Obscura. Nicole founded NAT Media, an original content company focused on producing and amplifying Black food creatives. She is the author of the Up South Cookbook and the Last OG Cookbook. Great names. Nicole splits her time between New York City and Georgia. And I just learned that she has a connection to parks too, having worked at New Yorkers for Parks. So we are really thrilled to introduce you to Kamau, who has created work for Van Cortlandt Park in the past. And of course, Nicole, any friend of Kamau's, is a friend of ours. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I'm muted. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Christina. Hello, Nicole. What's happening?
Hi.
Well, this is, I'm going to do a little bit of an additional introduction. I see some familiar faces and I see some mutual friends of both Nicole and I. And I just wanted to start off by saying that Nicole and I are fam. You know, we are degrees past friend. We have traveled together, broke bread together. And I feel like families you break bread with the most. My ex-wife and her good friends, her husband is good friends of mine. I've seen them as parents. And we're going to just have a different kind of conversation. We're going to definitely nerd out and get into the history. But I think that part of this discussion about stealing joy is keeping it contemporary as well, because we have found ways to keep joy forefront in our lives. And we live in interesting times. Ain't that right, Nicole?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, we're living examples of Black joy. Thanks, Kamau. I mean, I'm honored to be on the stage sharing anything with you. It's just amazing to see Black Gotham bloom and do so many great things all around New York City. So I'm happy. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Proud of you. So yeah, we'll have a little love fest. So we're gonna dive in a bit, and we're going to both talk a bit separately and then together, and then we're going to have some discussion. But it is going to be casual. This isn't going to be a lecture. This is a conversation. That's why the word intimate was included in the description. And I think that Stephanie is going to keep an eye on the chat. If people are raising hands or have comments, you can dive in. I'm going to get started because an hour can go by so quickly. I see my friend Sayodi from Brazil. We had a talk, and once we ended up going overtime because time can fly. So yeah, stealing joy. Can everybody see my screen okay? All right, fantastic. So in part what we're here for, there are records that you can find that show overlaps between the Van Cortlands, the Phillipses, the Chambers, people who have street names in Lower Manhattan, park named after them, but you also have people that were enslaved by them who don't have a drawing. And so part of what we wanted to do working with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, and it was an invitation that we were honored to accept, is begin to give some level of image or face to some of the people that lived on these grounds. And here we have Piero and Hester that were married and had a child, and they're wearing white as a way to acknowledge them in an ancestral role. This is Shannon playing the role of Hester and Piero by Pythagore, and they are having a moment where I asked them to imagine stealing a moment of joy, even though they are living in enslavement. And we're going to just unpack that a bit as we move forward, but I want to just acknowledge them on an ancestral level, give them like a libation. Like I said, we don't quite know how they look, but we have people who will someday be ancestors as well stepping in to give them an image. So I just want to acknowledge Hester, Piero, and what it just means to live through difficult times, but also know that if you can close your eyes and you can pray and you have your health, you can always find moments to steal joy. So shout out to them. Nicole, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Just want to open up with the libation.
That's great.
And this is how, once again, another way of introducing Nicole and I. Nicole, you want to tell them about this way you got them back in the day with this fantastic idea?
Black holidays. I'm sure most people tuned in or listening to our talk now heard about Juneteenth, especially this year. I feel like Juneteenth was an under the radar holiday. And then with the combination of COVID-19, the uprisings, the riots, and our president, Juneteenth just really just moved to the forefront of people's minds. But prior to this, I think this was 2014, Kamau, or 2015?
2015.
2015, Kamau and I came together. My book, the Up South Cookbook, was about to come out. And I was like, how can we partner together? Black Gotham. I think actually you were in the middle of doing a crowdfunding project around Black Gotham. And so we came together in the spirit of Juneteenth to tell our personal stories through our projects. And this is a menu. It was on a rooftop in Brooklyn and Red Hook, Kamau's old studio. And it was amazing. I think we did like 3 of these. Mm-hmm. People signed up for the dinner. The money went to the Kickstarter, and I got to promote my book. It was, wow. This is such a moment in time. For me, I've always celebrated Juneteenth, probably for the last almost 20 years in some form. I don't think the photo made it to the slide to our deck here, but previously at Prospect Park, what is the name of the house in Prospect Lefferts house? I think that's the house that's in the park. I had a picnic right in front of there. In celebration of Juneteenth. So I'm not new to this. Understanding what it means to take a pause and understand and celebrate our ancestors and food. I mean, culture is center, but food is probably the driving force, or the way that Black people, we like to gather around food. The table is a really sacred place. So you got to have yummy food when you're pausing.
No doubt. I want to call out this day 2. We had it on July 5th. And I think one of the first July 5th events that I ever went to, besides one that I did, was when you and Adrian had a July 5th party on the deck. And I remember that people always say, why do you celebrate July 5th? And I was like, well, before Black people had the Emancipation Proclamation or had the prospect of freedom, it was a form of shade. And I do believe Black folks invented shade. Celebrate on July 4th, but to celebrate the day after July 4th as a way of saying our freedom is coming. We don't have our independence. And so in the spirit of Juneteenth, but also acknowledging that July 5th is one of the oldest African-American holidays that we have as well. And we have oysters and we have, pickled vegetables and all types of things that relate to the 1600s in this particular piece. So I got a few more slides to kind of like show some credentials. This was when I turned 40 years old. My hair's, you can't quite tell because my hair is up, but we were able to work together and make a meal together. Hurt,
Kamau was a fake chef, guys. He thinks he knows his way around the kitchen. So we were in the kitchen together. That was a funny day. It was fun.
I'll take fake chef by you as a compliment. This is me just getting some photos of Adrian. We're at Martha's Vineyard. This is a beautiful baby. Crown just had a birthday.
He did. Garvey Crown.
How old is he now?
Garvey. Huh? He's 2 years old.
2 years old. Can you remember not being a parent now that you're 2 years into it?
No.
It's too foggy, right?
No.
And so just want to do a little rundown. And this is a timeline. You could write these dates down. July 5th is one of those things that we know from anecdotes and from old clippings that was the first time people would definitely begin to come together and celebrate under the time period of the United States. And it's important to understand that when you're discussing people like the Van Cortlands and Piero and Hester, that you have people who were here before there was the United States. Like there were Black people who were in the Bronx, what is the state of the Bronx, what is now Long Island, what is now Manhattan, before the United States was created. So some of the timeline we have to consider goes back to the 1600s, where people would have brought holiday traditions that we might not even know. There might have been some things that were being celebrated in the 1650s that relate to the Congo that we don't know of. But looking at the timeline of the United States, we know that people celebrated July 5th as a way of looking forward to freedom, even though it wasn't quite there. And watch night is something I did look up, and Nicole put me on the watch night because I wasn't hip to it. So I think that the smartest people, can learn. So I try to be smart by keeping my ears open and being around smart people. You want to tell us what watch night is? It's not the Night's Watch. It's not a Game of Thrones thing. So if you Google watch, you get a whole different thing. You'll get dragons instead of stories of 1800s.
I always like to start from the personal and then let Kamau add the historical aspects to it. I grew up in Athens, Georgia, which some people may know it's the home of REM. It's the home of the B-52s. And it's also my home. I'm a third generation Athenian, which is so crazy because most people are like, what? 3 generations in Athens? There are a ton of Black churches here, and I grew up in a Black church, in a Black Baptist church. I don't recall a New Year's Eve where there was not a watch night service. Mm. And 9, 10 o'clock, you go to church, there's a sermon, and then there's this kind of old-fashioned thing. I don't think they do it as much anymore, where people go up and they testify about how great God was in terms of how they were blessed this past year and what they want to be forgiven for. And it's like this testimony and a lot of old school spiritual songs and a release. Now, when I think back on the feeling, I remember it being a release. And people would have a brunch afterward, have food afterwards, and you would go on about your merry way. And probably the next day, which would be January 1st, you would have a very traditional Black Southern meal, black eyed peas and cornbread and collard greens, which signify luck and prosperity. I never knew until a few years ago that watch night service is connected to freedom celebrations. most people think about the Emancipation Proclamation being one day. But as we know that for enslaved people, we found out our freedom on all these random days. And so this watch night is a freedom celebration. Kamau, I'm sure you've done your deep dive and can get into the historical aspect of the watch night service, but it is definitely connected to the Black church and connected to enslaved people getting ready for their freedom or finding out about their freedom.
What's interesting is that I grew up in the church, AME, African Methodist Episcopal, and we definitely went to church on like New Year's, and they might have called it watch night. I just knew we was going to church. That's just what I thought about. I didn't realize that was some of the historical grounding of it. But yeah, I think also it's important to know that the Emancipation Proclamation was presented almost like a year before it was formally produced, January 1st, 1863. And so people were kind of getting ready for freedom, and also it's important to note that even though it was a time of war, the Emancipation Proclamation in many respects was like a wish for the future if we won the war, because people who already seceded from the Union aren't going to say, oh yeah, by the way, we have our own nation within a nation now, you're free. Like, nah, we're fighting to prevent that from happening. And so the places that had enslaved people is where Black folks were becoming free. Certain states weren't included. And so the whole process of becoming free, as Nicole said, it wasn't like one thing happened, light switch went on. It was, very much a part of the Civil War and a part of different people making those celebrations, which is why we have a Juneteenth, because we found out that some folks, after the war is over, are still finding out that, by the way, Emancipation Proclamation, and the war was coming to a close. You have independence, but it took time. But Juneteenth, I think, is something that I knew about growing up, but it, once again, has gotten bigger. And these are more or less in order. There was Black History Week before there was Black History Month. Some people think, oh, they gave us the shortest day of the year. It's like, that's not quite what happened. Black History Week was so successful that started in 1926, and it was like so successful that it just kept growing. All the schools began to share more information about Black history, and it went from being Black History Week to being Black History Month. So it's not like somebody gave Black people anything. This is
Thank you, Carter G. Woodson.
Right. Shout out to Carter G. Woodson, who has a very important book called The Miseducation of the Negro that you would think was a blog post from yesterday because it's so relevant. But people in the schools, people who are teachers, parents, would put together packages to make that Black History Week robust. And it was like, we can't do all this in a week, we need a month. And even though more people celebrate MLK Day than Kwanzaa, MLK Day actually comes after Kwanzaa. So pardon that one little sequence typo, because Kwanzaa goes back to 1966, and MLK Day wasn't a holiday until the 80s. And there are still states that find ways to not celebrate MLK Day, but Kwanzaa is something that you don't really require any particular, state to sanction. You can celebrate it on your own. And people sometimes say it's an African American celebration. Some say holiday. Some say because they call it a holiday, people don't want to celebrate it. They think they're like not celebrating Christmas. It begins on the 26th, goes into the 1st of January. There's the Nguzo Saba, 7 Principles, founded by Dr. Balana Karinga. So these are all different things that I feel have meaning. Kwanzaa is about celebrating our connection to Africa and our traditions that we've learned through time. Dr. King Day, of course, one of the most important leaders we've had in this country, period, but also somebody who just taught that we should live up to what is actually in the Constitution in many respects. And everything before that is like, how do we find a way to survive and maintain in this country that's belligerent toward us based on our skin color? So these are very much survival, but also celebration.
And I think what's super important is with all these holidays, Black holidays, there are cultural traditions that are tied to all of them. Some people don't even think about. I mean, for Juneteenth, the red drink. A few years ago, I wrote a piece for the New York Times about Juneteenth and zeroed in on the importance of red drink or red Kool-Aid and why Black people across the diaspora love the red drink. I mean, now it went from, hibiscus flower to sorrel to red soda pop to red Kool-Aid. But I was able really to tie the connection of modern Black celebrations and that red punch that's going to be on the table to us being brought to places all around the world. So yeah, Juneteenth has many food traditions, but I definitely would zero in on Juneteenth as being the red drink. The red drink crazily probably fits into every single one of these categories. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that people know that with each one, we could do a whole nother seminar about food traditions for each one of the Black holidays.
Totally. So here's a couple more historical slides, and then we're going to Nicole's going to talk a bit more about what she's doing with food, etc. Just wanted to point out that here in Lower Manhattan, just wanted to draw the actual name of the street, Cortlandt, and there are other street names, whether it be a Morris or a Chambers, that all go back to different people that were here during the time that the British had control of the territories. And part of why you have like a Cortlandt Street down here, or even me bringing the presence of a character from the Bronx, is because people from the Bronx would come down the East River and do what was more or less the initial business model of New York, which was be a commercial hub for the plantations of the British in the West Indies, like Antigua, Barbados, and Jamaica. And people who were working on the Cortlandt's property were more or less making the kind of provisions that people needed in the West Indies. And so this was initially the purpose why we even have in New York, which is named after one of the royal brothers who was a slave trader. And so our city bears the name of a slave trader created for the purpose of the slave trade. And so when you have inequality going down the line, it's part of it because it's like baked into the system. And even though he's holding a name, Othello, that's not quite his name. I just wanted to think about somebody else who was enslaved by the Delancey family. There's also a Delancey Street, that a lot of these Black people would have known each other, even though the people that were like the ruling class or the slaveholders might have been the names we know, whether it be Delancey or Van Cortlandt, or it be Philippe, or it be Chambers. A lot of the Black people that were managing their properties and their estates and their provisions would have known each other, whether they were up the Hudson Valley or down here in New York, because they were doing some of the same type of work. And so I'm gonna move through this kind of quickly. I know one thing that I know Nicole want to touch on is December and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I want to kind of like go back to something that often is discussed about Thanksgiving is, when did it start? I don't have one of my First Nations fam to sit here and go down the history. I know a lot of it myself, but it's a contentious holiday. I know that Black people celebrate it, but I also know that it's one of those days where it's kind of like, do we want to celebrate this day considering what it means? Is it really about celebrating what God gave you, or is it about celebrating taking away the lands from indigenous people? So it's a contentious conversation, but I want to just kind of put that ahead of time. Also, we discussed the Emancipation Proclamation, just kind of give some historical notes, which is why in Juneteenth, it's like, hey, you're free. But once again, this is only a few months after the Civil War ended, which was in April. So it's one of those things where I feel like Juneteenth is a holiday for reflection, because at the same time, it's like, yeah, you're free, but I feel like anytime, some white guy got to show up on a horse and tell you you're free on a piece of paper, you might not be free yet, which is why we've had so many struggles after 1865. We still are fighting for those papers to mean something. And then one of my final slides, I want to go and then let Nicole talk much more about how the food traditions tie in, is something about this particular year, about Juneteenth, that I noticed. And I don't know if you noticed it, maybe by show of hands or maybe put it in the chat. Have you all noticed that during the protests happening in May, that somewhere around like July, people were like dancing in the streets, doing like dancing lines and like playing music? Just want to get a show of hands. I'm actually going to check the chat and see if I'm crazy, because I've been noticing that. So I'm watching the chat. Did anybody notice people like dancing and celebrating during the protest? Some of that was viral. I'm seeing it, yes, from Deirdre. What up, Deirdre? Yeah, so I think that part of what I see in that, which is a metaphor in many respects, Roberta Todd, thank you, is I think that the idea of stealing joy is, even though something is challenging or insane, like the fact that we're having to still worry about Black lives being safe in these streets, is that there's ways to still kind of like pause in that protest and pause in that oppression and be like, you know what? We're gonna dance there real quick. We're gonna find some red drink. We're gonna have a moment, and then we're gonna get back to the struggle. But the struggle is also not losing your humanity, not losing your joy. And so I think that is a contemporary way of thinking about how people might have dealt with it in the past. Is that, yes, things are crazy, but we're going to still find ways to steal joy and not lose our happiness. Not entirely. So with that, Nicole, I have some slides for you. Let me know when to hit the button, and I will be your button pusher.
I mean, we've talked a lot about Juneteenth, and I feel like the summer months are definitely times when we are in a very normal time. We're celebrating, right? We're gathering with family and friends. We're outdoors. We are listening to music. We are barbecuing. These are all very traditional things that would happen at what I call a freedom celebration or a Juneteenth celebration in the summertime. And then next slide, we move into what I call a very reflective period. This photo here is from the Juneteenth piece that I did this year. I've done 2 for the New York Times. And this is really about Black chefs pushing on and stealing moments of joy in spite of COVID-19 halting many of their businesses. And this was really like, I wrote this story and had to come back and re-report because it was at the height of the uprising that was happening in the country. So that's Juneteenth. Next slide. That's from the original Juneteenth piece. No, that's from last year, sorry. A holiday of joy and protest. Next slide. That is from the Lefferts House. Whoa, that is from like the early 2000s. Just a picnic with friends that I did at the Lefferts House. Next slide. Martha's Vineyard. We have to talk about Black people creating spaces where they can just be full on joyful. Black Martha's Vineyard is such a special notion and a special place. During the months of August, you can, get on your ferry, go to the island of Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod area, and just be Black and see like so many other Black people playing tennis at the beach, getting ice cream. No one is trying to wheel a deal. Everyone is just exhaling. And I've done that for the last 10 years. This year was the first year that I did not go to Martha's Vineyard. And I wrote about it. I wrote about the magic of Martha's Vineyard through a very food lens. Thanks to my mentor and African diaspora food historian, Jessica Harris, I got introduced to Martha's Vineyard. And I would say for any Black person, you should experience Martha's Vineyard one time. You can't even really put it into words, the magic that happens there and what it means to just be in a place where you don't have to worry about so much that it's dark and you're walking down the street and you have a hoodie on and you may get shot. It just feels like for how many days that you're there, that just totally disappears. So this is actually from a dinner, Kamau and this was at the house that we rented, and it was fresh fish and salad and all the bounty of Martha's Vineyard in August on that table.
And even the mosquitoes seemed to respect the game a little bit that night.
Yeah. It's just a beautiful place. I mean, I am lucky to have been brought into the Martha's Vineyard fold. I think there's so many misconceptions too about who goes to Martha's Vineyard. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. It is for anyone who wants to experience something super special that enslaved people and free people helped to build. And not even enslaved people, native folks too. Whole nother story and conversation about Martha's Vineyard and Plymouth, Massachusetts we can have.
Can I add an asterisk for what you just said about indigenous people?
Yeah.
One of my friends who identifies as Black and is a Black woman, but she also has like about 3 different things happening in her ethnic cocktail. One of them is American Indigenous. And when she told me she was in Martha's Vineyard, I was like, oh, look at you. She goes, no. My ancestors been here. She goes,
Wampanoag, yeah.
Exactly. She's Wampanoag. She goes, my Wampanoag side was here before it was a bougie thing, before white folks got here. So don't call me bougie. This is our land first, before I could be called bougie. I was like, point.
And actually, Kamau, that previous picture of you taking a picture of Adrian, which is my husband, we should have been before we got on there taking our pictures, posing. We should have took a pause and thanked the Wampanoag people for that land, because that's where we were. We were up on the cliffs. I forget the name of
something kind of point.
I'm having a brain lapse. It's been a long day. I'll come back to it. Yeah. And this is our Black Gotham up south collabo on the rooftop, laughing, having a good time, still in a moment of joy.
Yeah, people have commented on this picture like, bro, that's a real smile. I was like, I was happy. We got the Kickstarter. We have food. My cup is full. I'm good. I was good that day.
Aquina, that's the name of it. That's where we were taking the picture.
Okay.
That's the part of Martha's Vineyard. It's called Aquina. This is food. Kamau and I, this is his 40th birthday where we made food. A lot of vegetarian. I think everything we did was vegetarian. I'm working on a story right now about a Black holiday and zeroing in on, veganism and vegetarianism and how that is incorporated into our Black holidays. Everything ain't always fried chicken and pork chops, all that stuff is great, but we love veggies. And there's a tradition of green veggies and growing our own food in the Black community. Next slide. This is Kwanzaa. December is such a holy time. Really, I would say November to January 1st is a really special time for Black people. I told Kamau this on the phone. I was having a conversation with someone about some Black people saying, I don't celebrate Thanksgiving, which is fine. I don't celebrate Christmas. I don't celebrate Kwanzaa. And they're like, all that stuff is commercial. Okay. Why are we celebrating, the stealing of land for people? I agree with all of that. And then we move to the conversation, like if you look at slave narratives or read any accounts for enslaved people, you will see that most people started to plan their escape or escaped November, December. It was a time when the enslavers were relaxing, they were chilling. And people understood the routine. So they're like, oh, Christmas, the week of Christmas, I'm getting out of here. So I think Black people should really lean into this time of year being a really special time, sacred time to honor our ancestors and to reflect. And I will also say that food, there's so many food traditions, like slaughtering a pig that was going to feed your family for the whole year. Making sugarcane or cane syrup. This is a time of year when all of that was done. And we just need to really think about how we put all these negative words and all this negative speak on holidays that for some people mean more than just Santa is coming. And I think Kamau and I were talking about that a little bit. And you were like, oh, let's talk about Kwanzaa. I'm like, we can't throw Christmas away.
I ain't mad at you. Nice little pregnant pause.
Yeah.
I grew up in a church, and yeah, like every year my family does like a long Christmas list. Like, we go for Christmas. I'll be like, I'm good. I'll see you for Kwanzaa, right? So it isn't like I hate on it. It's just like, like I said, me and Nicole fam. We're going to talk like real. Since I was in high school, actually, I brought Kwanzaa to my family when I was in college, and it was one of the like peace offerings. It was like, I'm growing dreads and I'm reading these books, and I don't know about, I changed my name from Samuel to Kamau, and I was like, I don't know about this holiday, and people were upset about it, but Kwanzaa became like our bridge, and now like the biggest holiday that we have that both sides of my family celebrate is Kwanzaa. Everybody still celebrates Christmas, but somehow there's like a day of Kwanzaa where everybody just shows up, and people are really getting into honoring the ancestors, because as we get older, it's like, pour out a little something for Aunt so and so, for Uncle so and so. You know what I mean? I think that you can do them all, and I think that that's one of the things that I feel has been important about learning from the Black diaspora is we always have these: are you at Malcolm X? Or are you a Dr. King? Are you a Muslim? You're a Christian? Christmas or no Christmas? It's like, bruh, we don't have to make all those choices. If we take care of ourselves and take care of each other, let's not make these qualifiers that make you no longer a part of the circle, especially when we still figuring it out. We all are in the fishbowl. We're not inheriting holidays, we're making them. The person who created Kwanzaa is still alive, and Dr. King should still be alive right now, to be, in my opinion. So I think that we're living in a space where we're making it up, but we're making it up with purpose. And so I don't think it's time to cut people out. I think it's more about making the circle bigger. So I ain't throwing away Christmas. I just don't, I don't.
Well, your story also reminds me of how I would come home for Christmas and be like, I don't want no pork. Don't put no pork on my plate. Ooh, no pork. You go off to college, and over the years, I started eating pork. And a few years ago, I wrote an article for ESPN Undefeated about Thanksgiving and Black traditions. And I want to just read a little paragraph from it. Pre-emancipation Black artisans rule butchery, according to Ann L. Bauer in the 2009 African American Foodways. Savannah's Jackson Shuffell, a mulatto, opened his shop in 1849 and began to sell choice cuts of meat. An 1894 article in the Savannah Tribune noted its continuous operation and the fact that Shuffell had grown rich. He was not alone. We took the fat of pigs and bought the freedom from wives and filled footlockers for children bound for college. And in 2011, high on the hall, culinary scholar and historian Dr. Jessica B. Harris writes about enslaved Africans. The culinary monotony would change only at holiday time. There might be barbecues. The cooks for these events were Black men, and the headliner was the sow, which is a pig. The part when she said only at holiday time. I just, for me, I'm learning of that joy means me not stomping on other Black people and how they celebrate holidays. And how they steal joy. I think that's part of us being joyful as well, is respecting and understanding Black joy exists in so many different ways.
Yeah, Ramadan. I mean, I think that the Nation of Islam practices Ramadan in December every year. Some other times it falls in December too, and so it just feels like it's a time where everybody's just reflecting. I know like my West Indian fam, especially people who are Trinidadian, are like, yo, December it's like time to clean the house. Like you house got to be buffed. Like we don't go into the new year until the house, it's a serious holiday. That's like not a holiday, but like you get your house together. I know one thing that I feel in my mind, I've created a holiday stretch where I think about, I do begin with December 26th, no shade toward December 25th, but I think about Kwanzaa ending on the first of the year. So you go from ending Christmas to the 26th, you take your 7 days of Nguzu Saba, and then January 1st, there you are, it's faith, it's Imani, you're in your new year, and then like in 2 weeks, you're celebrating Dr. King and Dr. King's voice, and then you got a couple weeks in this Black History Month, and then you got March, which is Women History Month, and I think that, women are so critical to the Black community. Women are critical, period, but in the Black diaspora experience specifically, there's things that Black women have had to do that we would not be able to make the kind of progress without Black women. And so I feel like between March going back to like December, you actually have you got like 2 months, you know what I'm saying, to like really be focused on what you got to get done. Call it a holiday season, but I feel like you can go into your first day of the year with a rocket on your back, focused. Meditate, pray, and I like to, end my year strong, begin my year strong. I like the vision board and get it together.
And for working class people, I grew up working class household. I mean, I'm not gonna say that my mom, my aunts, and people in my very working class family were sitting down and like, we're meditating, let's light the candles. They're like, I'm just gonna relax. This is my time to make my rum punch or my red velvet cake and just veg out on the couch. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because for many people, they get 2 or 3 days off. This is the only stretch in the year that they get 2 or 3 days and they can just relax with their families. So I'm okay with people not delving into Kwanzaa. I feel like a lot of principles of Kwanzaa, Black people, conscious Black people, and some who are not conscious, and I use that word loosely, they're living those principles every single day. Yeah. So is it important for Black people to recognize Kwanzaa? Sure. But sometimes we just need to be. Do we need to go out and buy a Kanar? Maybe, but I want to make sure that I don't push people into celebrating the holidays, but recognizing and understanding them is kind of the most important thing to me.
Year round.
Yeah.
We got a poppin' chat going on over here. I've been checking out the chat situation. So Stephanie, do you want to help us out with I don't know if there's questions, there's comments, there's a lot going on in there. I see Deirdre, Yasmin. I don't want to say someone's name wrong, but someone's last name is Tenon Lewis. There's a lot of good discussion happening. So we got like 11 minutes. I hope that we didn't, wax poetic too long. I enjoyed the conversation, but Nicole, we do this in a few different places, so it's been a blessing.
Yeah, I was trying to be too tame and not just be like real Nicole with you.
Word up.
So my brain was doing like this. I see Deirdre's comment, yes, about people were given time to travel with loved ones from enslaved people were given opportunities to travel to visit loved ones in neighboring sites. Yeah, and then that's when they also like, I ain't coming back. Peace out.
Does anybody want to speak up or ask? Someone said, be real with us, Nicole. Nicole's keeping it real enough.
I love this thing about my grandmother said that all grandchildren stop eating after going to college, eating pork. I got to say this thing about the college thing we didn't talk about. I know, Kamau, we talked about it a little bit in our pre-pro meeting about other moments of Black joy throughout the year that are not necessarily holidays, like homecomings. And there are, when I say homecomings, I mean a few different things. Churches have homecomings where it's kind of like a family reunion and people come back to the home church and they call that a homecoming. But historically Black colleges and universities have homecoming. to me, as a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, wow, homecoming is an experience. It's a feeling. It is the epitome of Black joy as a college student. The Times did a piece about it this year, where it was just general about what does it mean for homecoming this year, since all of them were canceled. And then I zeroed in on homecoming brunches, but not a Black holiday, but it's definitely a cultural moment in the Black community. And the word joy is like stamped all over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like Beyonce turned the planet into homecoming. I feel like we knew about it, but like Beyonce's piece that she did with the homecoming Coachella, everybody's like, "What is this?" It's like it's called Black College.
But it's a joyful. I mean, listen, I will tell you the most joyful moment at Clark Atlanta after being there like 5 or 6 years and graduating. When you look out on the yard and just see like rows and rows of Black students, male, female, whatever they identify as, you're just like, wow. It is a feeling that's unshakable. I mean, you can go online now, look at Morehouse graduation. It is Black joy.
Yeah. And yeah, you know what else is like a holiday that we don't quite, I'm not in a fraternity, but I feel like Founders Day is pretty much like a Black holiday if you're in a sorority. And just to kind of give a baseline here, I mean, some people might be like, pretend like they understand what's going on. Let me help out. HBCU stands for Historical Black College or University. A lot of these go back to the 1800s when the Civil War is wrapping up. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's begin to build institutions for Black people to advance themselves. We had lots of different debates, whether it be like Booker T. Washington versus Du Bois. But the bottom line was, do we want to learn things that's going to be like, this is for the brain, let's learn these skills and, and elevate and get better jobs, or do we want to like make technical skills and like be better at the work that we know how to do? So some colleges go that spectrum, but on Black colleges you also have these Greek organizations, different fraternities, and Founders Day celebrates like the founders of different fraternities and sororities, and it's like a big thing. I'm not Greek, or I'm not in a sorority. It's called being Greek. But that becomes, I feel, bigger every year. It's not just like people who are in a sorority. People recognize it. I think maybe Kamala made it even more popular by referencing it.
Who?
Kamala talked about Founders Day. I think she had like a Founders Day virtual event.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Because she's in Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Someone asked here too, and I got to mention this because I think this is super important. When you were planning the Van Cortlandt piece, did you come across any events or foods that gives insight on how they celebrate? I guess that's a question for you. But I want to make sure, Kamau, I know you're doing something with MoFad, that we shout out MoFad and their postponed / upcoming exhibit called, what is it called? African American, which is all about Black food. And I actually was on the advisory for the exhibition. It was supposed to open the week of the shutdown here in New York City, but a lot of research has been done about 17th, 18th century Black food ways. And I think, Kamau, you have some very specific things you can touch on if something connected to Van Cortlandt Park.
Well, here's one thing that I'll share that I think is contextual, so it's not specifically this is what they did. I do know that when it comes to working the land and working with food, I believe that there are already kind of like some built-in cycles with like harvest and with taking care of the land that might create its own level of like celebration. But I also know that it was contentious for Black people to be Christian for about a good half of the 18th century. And so a lot of times Black people would create their own celebrations while the people who were the enslavers had like their celebrations. Like sometimes Black people would plot during holidays for rebellions, kind of how you mentioned people like running away 1800s. People often would also plan rebellions during holidays where they would go off and, celebrate being, slaveholders and being Christians at the same time. And Black folks would be like, okay, I can't go to church, but I'm gonna make some plans and some plots. And so I don't have a specific that they would have done, but I do know that they probably found some time during the holidays that were set aside for European Christians and create their own types of celebrations. I do know that Pinkster, that comes more from the Dutch experience. And if you go to like, when I was in the Netherlands, I was asking folks about Pinkster and they were like, it has nothing to do with black people here at all. I was like, yeah, but when y'all came over to this part of the world and you celebrated the idea of Jesus coming down to a human level, that kind of turned into like, all right, who's low amongst us? That kind of represents coming low. Let's have a black person be in charge for a day, polyrhythmic instruments, food, celebrations. And it happened here in Manhattan. It also happened up, Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
And so you had those kind of like cross sections. So I know Pinkster happened, but I also know that it's a bit of an irony. But like when Christians were celebrating their holidays that black folks couldn't celebrate, black people would kind of get together and do their own thing.
I mean, the foods of the 17th, 18th century, I think people just need to think about what people were growing and eating and what animals were around. It was very much about what you could grow. I mean, there's always this misconception too that collard greens are from Africa. No, they're not. It's a European vegetable. Like they gave it to enslaved people because they're like, wait, we can grow this and it'll grow all year round. So when we're thinking about, at least when I do my research, Kamau probably is doing way more research than I am around what people were eating during certain time periods, I always think about, okay, was there refrigeration at the time? What kind of tools, garden tools were available at the time? That kind of helps unfold what people were possibly eating. Is it the Northeast? Could people grow sugarcane there? Did sweet potatoes grow well? That to me is uncoding what people, enslaved people, particularly Black people, were eating during a certain time period. And we know that holidays meant celebration. You bring out your good stuff, right? you wanna feast. You have more time to make the cake. You may not have had dairy, right? When you're talking about a certain time period where butter was a luxury. So that is how I started to think about what were Black people eating in 1785 on Christmas Day, or what were they eating in 1985 on Christmas Day?
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting cookbooks. Somebody asked about cassava and yuca, but there are some cookbooks that have been uncovered from the 1600s. It kind of gives you a sense of like what people were cooking in New Netherland. You also have some of the records that show Black landowners had to pay tribute. That includes like squash, peas, corn, and a fat hog. And you also know that, like, if it's like maritime culture, you're going to have things that are going to be salted. You're going to have things that are pickled. People are drinking. So I know, and for me, drinking is also an important culinary thing to consider.
Although some of your Kwanzaa people don't like the idea of folks drinking at Kwanzaa.
I ain't mad at them.
I think that's policing. I think that's policing Black joy. I'm only saying that because I'm deep in research for a story, and it's just amazing to see the range of Black people and how they think.
So
you think there's only one way to celebrate Kwanzaa, which goes back to policing Black joy.
Well, I think to give the other side of the coin and let it spin is that there is this is new, like Kwanzaa's new. So you do have your old heads that are kind of like, nah, you use a match, not a lighter to light the candles. And I'd be like, word, match. I don't use a lighter. And I tell my parents, we have to have matches. So I feel like it's a new holiday. And so I do understand people saying, make sure it gets done right, because in 20 years, people will be bobbing for apples, talk about haram. So it's like, I get the strictness way for us to like navigate the strict, knowing that everything's going to kind of have a bit of a bend.
But if it's about the principles, my thing is, why does it matter if if we're striking it with the match that are lighter? First of all, I didn't even know that, so you just schooled me right there. And I celebrate Kwanzaa, so
get you some matches. Don't mess up. We're at 7:01, Stephanie. We're just. I mean, I know I enjoyed this conversation. I hope there was some. I feel like there was like more than questions. There was just kind of like
comments.
Yeah, like a holla back vibe. So thank everybody. I thank everyone who put in the chat and gave the holla back vibe. Just on, speaking of celebrations and joy, can everybody just like unmute themselves and just make a noise?
Woo!
Thank you for this. Hey.
Thank you.
Hey, Jackie.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great to see
I'm
everyone.
looking for part 2.
Thanks,
Yeah, please.
Part 2 for sure, okay?
Yeah, but the most important thing is to eat before we come to your next.
Have time.
I
So
also hope in part 2 you spend more time with the photography piece and the connection to Van Cortlandt, and because that's an incredible envisioning you did from Lower Manhattan up to the mansion.
okay.
So I'd really like for you to present more insight into the present and your reenactment and where they were on the plantation and what you envision they're having joy, how they did it, even if there aren't any records. You're a historian as well, so that so many things happened, behind the back door in the woods, and the woods are still there. So I would really like for you to extend all of this. This background is incredible and at present as well, but take it in there because it's hard to see the place and the graveyard is there. So I would really like for you to travel through them because I believe they're still there.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Am I saying the name right? Deprator?
Deprator. Yes. Thank you.
This will be my December gift to you. Is a promise to do what you've asked. I will find.
God. Gratitude is mine.
Respect. Thank you. Love your voice, by the way.
Thank you.
Stephanie, do you want to say anything? Should we like mute our mics and let you say
Sure.
Okay.
notes, or if Nicole has any comments to close out?
Well, let me just thank you both for a really warm and wonderful evening, and this was just everything. It was great. And I want to thank Bronx Council on the Arts, Community Board 8, New York City Parks, Historic House Trust, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs for their support of all of the programming. I think that there may be some more things that we do together, and I'm looking forward to that. And also next week, if you go to our website, vancortlandt.org, you'll see that we also have a talk with the folks from the Lenape Nation talking about the Native American experience in the park. So really looking forward to that as well. But this is not the last you're going to see of Kamau, Ware, and hopefully Nicole will be a friend too for a while. So thank you, everybody.
We haven't even mentioned that we're installing a work of art on the Van Cortlandt house.
We have not, but that's because we have to get permission first. So we are going to have some work, hopefully, and we'll be discussing that with folks at Parks and moving forward with that.
Nicole, anything you want to share before you sign off?
No, just thank everyone. Thank you, Van Cortlandt Park, Kamau. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate kind of putting together some kind of talk. I feel like I've been rambling. It's been a long day, but thank you.
No, it's joyful. It's December. My last comment, whether you're in Brazil or the Bronx, blessings to you and your ancestors and your family and your future. Have a fantastic end of a very crazy year. If you've made it to this day, you are blessed many times over. And so I wish to see you all in the next year, Thank you for the opportunity, Stephanie and Van Cortlandt, to build with you all and talk to a dear friend of mine, Nicole, about Black Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful night, everybody. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.